dog the whole time. I couldn't eat a thing.
Oh.
It was terrible. But anyway, we came here, and Gus had an aunt in the Bronx, and we stayed with her for a short time. And then we went to see my mother-in-law in Titusville, Pennsylvania.
That must have been...
which was very difficult
that
for
was
me.
a culture shock, wasn't it?
It was a culture shock. They lived in a very tiny, terrible little house. And of course, Gus at that time already was, you know, very sophisticated.
Yeah.
He was really practically like a European. He was so knowledgeable about art and everything else. And he used to send nude sketches to his mother, who tore them up and threw them away because she said, that's horrible. How could he do that? But anyway, and he sent her a fur coat, which she never wore. She said that was horrible. How could he send her something like that? Anyway.
Well, you didn't have to live there, so that was good.
That was very good. Well, I wouldn't have lived in Titusville for anything. It's very interesting, but you know, many, many years later, we met a couple. The husband is a Protestant minister, and his wife is working in the high school in Titusville. And Gus sent them an invitation to one of his shows many, many years ago. At that time, we didn't have a museum, we didn't have any of those things yet. And this couple became great friends of ours, and they come and visit us every summer. And they're just a terrific couple. We love them.
That's
they're
so
wonderful.
good.
It's very, very nice.
So there were different kinds of people in Titusville.
Yes, there were a lot of different people, of course.
So this is what I started to say before, is that you always knew the right place to go. When you started your first job, how did you get your first job here?
Well, it was very funny because it wasn't really the first job was I went to the, you know, first I came here, I didn't know how to do anything on an electric sewing machine, and that's what they put me on, and I couldn't do it. So I got kicked out, and I went to the National Handbag Authority, you know, which was at that time on 5th Avenue between 33rd and 34th Street on one of the higher floors. And I spoke to a man who was the director. His name was Berkowitz, Mr. Berkowitz. And he was a very nice man, and he told me that the handbag business is like strudel in America. They make, you know, it's all made in different operations. It's not like in Hungary, one person made the bag from start to finish. I mean,
it's like an assembly line.
Now here it's an assembly line, but there it was, you know, the pocketbook maker would make the pattern, and then it would be cut from, you know, the parts would be cut, and they would be skived, and then they would do all the operations on it, you know, whatever part had to be turned in was done that way, or if it was a frame bag that didn't have any turning in, it was sewed up and turned inside out. So very different than in America. Here they have different people doing everything. There's a pattern maker, then there is a pocketbook maker, and a helper, and a cementer, and then there is a sewing machine operator, and they, you know, when they start to work, I mean, the cutter cuts leather or the silk or whatever it is, and if it's leather, they have to skive it because it's too thick to work on. What does that mean? It's thinned down at the edges wherever you have to turn it over or sew it. So that's part of the work.
So Judy was unique. I mean, she was the only person in America who could do this.
Incredible.
And became a star at whatever company she worked at.
But how do you, I mean, how many people looking for a position, a job someplace, would think to go to the head of the federation or the something? I mean, that's what
But it makes
amazed
sense,
me.
doesn't it?
Oh, total sense.
Yes.
Well, I didn't know
Was it that she just didn't know anything else, so you did it?
I just went there.
Right.
And then, you know, then I went to work for a company called Gary, which was a $5 bag. because Mr. Berkowitz has a son who was a so-called designer there, and he knew nothing. But that's how he operated. So I worked there for a comparatively short time, and one of the sewing machine operators said to me, "Boy, you come from Europe, you made the finest stuff there. Go to the union and talk to the manager," which I did. I went to Mr. Lublina, was a manager.
See, another person.
That's right. You always went to the top.
Exactly.
And he said to me, "I don't believe you can do what you say you can do." I said, "Just send me there." So he sent me to Nettie Rosenstein, which was a top company at the time.
Yeah, she was the woman who invented the little black dress.
Right.
Yes.
So Jeffrey, you be Gus in this, all right?
Okay.
Gerson is your husband, who has always been a fine painter.
Yes.
He's exhibited in museums.
Museums and galleries all over the country.
Right. And they just melded together.
They were an ideal couple, and they inspired each other. Gus's artwork often inspired Judy's designs for handbags.
It still goes on, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Judy is always very responsive to Gus and his paintings. They're very, very supportive of each other.
And Gus, when you later left Nettie Rosenstein and you went into business for yourself, Gus was an important person in that business.
Yes, of course.
He did everything. He was a jack of all trades, including delivering packages on the buses and the subways to all the department stores. He said he was the highest paid messenger in New York.
So so you decided to be on your own. By that time, designers knew your work. I mean, department stores, no?
Well, some of them did. I mean, I worked, you know, when I worked at Rosenstein, there were quite a few of the big shots that I knew, you know, the buyer of Neiman Marcus, the buyer of Saks, the buyer of Bonwit Teller. But of course...
And in the industry, she was very well known. And don't forget that from 1953 on...
63.
Well, that's when you started the company. But from 1953 on, every First Lady carried a Judith Leiber designed handbag to her husband's inauguration.
So Nettie Rosenstein sold them at first? Or did they give them?
No, Nettie Rosenstein gave Mamie Eisenhower a bag.
And that's what stuck.
And I designed it. And then after that... You know, when Mrs. Nixon became the president's wife, I made the bag for her, and at that time I was already in my own business, and I did Mrs. Johnson, and
Mrs. Kennedy.
Kennedy, I didn't know. Kennedy was.
Who did her bag?
I don't know.
Maybe she didn't have a bag.
Maybe she didn't. I don't know.
Did you meet these people before you designed for them, or did you just design?
No, I didn't even know them. I didn't know Mrs. Eisenhower, but I was very lucky that they let me do that.
So then, when you decided to go out on your own, what did you just contact the stores, or they knew that you were doing that?
No, I didn't know. You know, well, Mrs. Nixon's dress was made by Adele Simpson, and I knew Adele very well, and she engineered Mrs. Nixon and Mrs. Johnson. And then after that, I didn't, you know, Jackie Kennedy I didn't do. We weren't in business when she became the Mrs. President.
But they carried your bags all over the world.
Yes, and she had one of my bags too.
And you were known for the jeweled bags. Is that what became so?
No, actually,
you've done everything.
I've done everything, small and large. But you know, when we started, we didn't make jeweled bags. I started out in 1963, and we made leather bags and silk bags. And we used to make, I wanted to make little small bags, so I made a lot of comparatively small bags. And they started to take off. People loved them. They liked them. We were very happy about that. And at that time, we were already going to Italy every year. And Gus and I decided that we were going to try to make a metal bag. So we made the chatelaine, which it's in the book. This one. That was my first metal bag, and it was when it came in, you know, the man who made the mold, they plated them in Europe.